Hi, everybody, and thank you so much for joining me today for myth number 3 of our codependent myths series. This myth states that if you're codependent, you must be from an alcoholic or abusive family. And I don't know about you, but as dysfunctional as my family was, there was no abuse. So if that's the case, don't you feel sort of ripped off that you've been thinking that you're codependent all of these years and it must be because of your damn family? Just not the truth. When I think of all of the money I spent over the years, all of the hours in therapy, all of the convictions in myself that I was codependent because of my family, because they didn't raise me right and it was all their fault, I could just scream. And I imagine when some of you break through these myths of codependence to understand that it's actually a developmental delay that causes codependence, that we get stuck in a stage of codependency, you're going to be just as pissed as I am. You'll get through it because ultimately we need to get through it and get on with it because it's about our development. In order to make that shift from codependent behavioral strategies into living from our authentic self, we actually have to take responsibility for our own development. So even though in many families growing up, whatever decade you grew up in, families were unconscious, doing the very best they can. And when you think of how young psychology is and theories of psychology and psychological understanding and neuropsychology and brain imaging, you think of how young they are and that we're just learning the mechanics of our mind and why we behave the way we do. Young Freud, Adler, Melanie Klein, all of these people, John Bowlby, all of these people who added so much to our psychological understanding, it was less than 100 years ago that some of these really important theories started coming into light. And so we have to now myth bust. We have to liberate ourselves from the limitations of these myths that cause us to feel like victims. And there are lots of people who will tell you you're codependent because you had an abusive childhood. And what do you mean you didn't have an abusive childhood? You wouldn't be acting this way if you weren't from an abusive family. Somebody must have been alcoholic. So then you have to search through and go, okay, well, maybe my third cousin on my father's side was alcoholic and that's why I'm codependent. We have to look for the roots of the addiction in our family to affirm other people's belief that we're codependent as a result of these things that happened in our formative years, or they didn't happen in our formative years. Or a friend says, I wonder if you were sexually abused. That's why you're so frightened of men and are so submissive. I wonder if your father, grandfather, uncle, I wonder if they sexually abused you. And there was a whole industry during the 80s and 90s and 2000s around false memory syndrome from people who were led to believe that because they behaved a certain way, because of their own failures to thrive, because their relationship breakups, because of their anxiety and depression, it must have been because of their abusive family. We look for blame outside of ourselves. It's just the first step in the process, cause and effect. And yes, all of the things that happened to us in childhood that negatively impacted our development have caused delays in our psychological development. But once we discover that, hey, we can, go back into our childhood over again, but we can take responsibility for our own behavior. And if we find ourselves acting like victims, We don't make people into victimizers like we made our parents into victimizers of us. What we do is say, I choose not to go into this pattern of behavior. I choose a different relationship behavior. So the myth that we're from an alcoholic, an abusive family, that we're addicts ourselves, that we have a mental illness, that we have to recover from an addiction that we have. We're addicted to love, we're addicted to helping. These are all failures in developing a secure bond. And in the chakra system, for those of you who are familiar with it, our root chakra forms that seat of ourselves, that seat that says, I am entitled to exist whole, pure, and as amazing a human being as I am in any relationship. I do not have to conform. That is the seat that we must sit in all of our relationships. We have to stop with these excuses for why I can't say to someone, excuse me, would you put your phone down while you're talking to me? You know, that we do not have to tolerate other people's behavior and then go turn around and blame it on that person and blame the fact that we can't say anything on an abusive childhood, so-called abusive childhood, for a fact. Most of us are just waking up in consciousness and in that seat of ourselves, that root that we have to get firmly rooted in who we are and how we want to be in relationship, and exercise the power that we have to choose, to develop, to choose to pick up where childhood left us, anywhere it left us, to pick up so that we can have the relationships that we want to have, so that we can live the life on purpose, so that we don't shy away from the things that frighten us. We say the things that we need to say because we are entitled to speak, to be here, and to not shut down and be small, because that's how we survived our childhood. That's all for today. Until next time, power up your innate potential and stay tuned for myth number 4 of the Codependent series to help you with another relationship breakthrough. Bye for now.